Well, we're on the streets of Merseyside for what will probably be Newcastle United's last ever visit to Goodison Park. I say probably because they could still get drawn together in the FA Cup. You never know, it's happened before. Ian Rush getting the winner of all people. So yeah, today's game, huge game for Eddie Howe, huge game for Newcastle. They've got to try and address what was poor away form last season. We all know what happened here last season. Newcastle beaten 3-0. Jordan Pickford orchestrating the lightning at Goodison Park. Newcastle United will be hoping to avoid a repeat of that today. One final time for Newcastle United here at Goodison Park in the Premier League. There's been some unbelievable games here down the years, but the last 20 Newcastle have only won 3, which is quite a surprising statistic. I think you look at this game and Newcastle really do need to address their away form. They've been unconvincing on the road. Yes, they beat Wolves, yes, they picked up a point against Bournemouth, but that seemed to be very difficult. And that Fulham game, well, the least said about that the better. Today they've got to go and show on that pitch one final time in a top flight fixture that they can live with this atmosphere. They couldn't last season, Everton winning 3-0, but Newcastle, they'll fancy it's a great day down here on Merseyside. The sun is shining, Newcastle fans will be giving their team everything from the first whistle, and I think it's going to be a proper occasion. 5:30 kick-off in front of TV cameras. Should be a great game, but ultimately for Newcastle it's all about the result. I asked Eddie Howe if he would be emotional coming back to Goodison Park one last time yesterday. He didn't really bite on that. I think he's just desperate to get the 3 points, and I'm sure if Newcastle can put the same effort levels in they did against Man City, they've got every chance. Night of missed chances for Newcastle United, not least Anthony Gordon's penalty in the first half. But it has to be said, Gordon didn't disappear after that penalty miss. He was probably Newcastle's best player, always on the ball, always pushing, always trying to create, and he nearly got one of his teammates in Bruno in the second half, who shot over, and he got in himself, also blazing over at the Park end. But sadly Newcastle just could not find that winner. They created 14 chances. He probably just edged it here, but it was always sort of on a tightrope, and Newcastle United really will leave here disappointed. I think the fact that the Everton fans were celebrating at the final whistle, that it ended 0-0, shows you that they see this as a better point than Newcastle. But ultimately, again, for Newcastle, their away form continues to be questionable. Did they do enough here to win tonight? Hard to say. I think really they've got to start taking these chances, or they're going to come back to haunt them. Newcastle leave here with that point, and yeah, it keeps the unbeaten run going, but ultimately I think Eddie Howe will feel a little bit deflated after that one tonight. Well, the dust has now settled here at Goodison Park for Newcastle. It's the last ever Premier League game here. When people look back at this in 100 years, they might think it was a bit of a bore draw, but believe me, there were plenty of fireworks in this game, and not least when Anthony Gordon won a penalty in the first half. And yeah, Sandro Tonali being brought down, he goes and picks the ball up, he tries to compose himself, but unfortunately Jordan Pickford guesses the right way and it hits his knee, and he wins the mind games. The two have been known to have a lot of banter over penalties in training with England, but yeah, it was a disappointing moment for Anthony Gordon on his return here, And I think really when Newcastle get back up the road and assess everything, they'll feel they probably should have won this game. With two fit strikers in Isak and Wilson, very possible he would have. But the chance in the second half, Bruno had a great opportunity and blazed it over. Almiron got in a couple of times but couldn't create anything, and Gordon as well was slipped in by Almiron and blazed over. So yes, 0-0, it's a point. It's one where Newcastle fans will feel there was something more there for them, but I think overall a clean sheet, a point on the road. Newcastle in the top 6 going into the international break as things stand, and I think really when we dissect this game, Newcastle still creating chances, they're looking better defensively, they're looking a bit better on the road, and that's going to be important moving forward. Last season that was the Achilles heel for Newcastle, losing too many games. They lost here of course, but today a point in the pocket. They move on now to that international break, and then it's Brighton at home, a very crunch game, but really they've got a platform to build on now. Eddie Howe knows what he's got at his disposal, he knows who's to come back. I don't think he's getting carried away with where Newcastle are, but ultimately I still think he feels there's room for improvement, and that's going to be very important going forward. So we're signing off here for what we think will be one last time from Goodison Park. The only way that can change is if Newcastle get Everton in the FA Cup in the 3rd round, which I mentioned earlier has happened before. The chances of it happening again are very, very low. So looks like this will be one last trip here for Newcastle, and what a traditional old ground it's been. I did ask Eddie Howe if he would miss it, and he joked that he wouldn't. I think he's talking about the atmosphere, potentially talking about the fact that he got relegated here with Bournemouth in his final game for the Cherries, so it hasn't been kind to him. But I think overall, I think he will appreciate, the atmosphere here. I mean, even when the penalty was missed today, you'd think Everton had scored a goal, and Eddie Howe said exactly that in his press conference. So he said it felt like it was a goal for Everton when that save was made. So that's the power of a place like this. I think again, when the dust settles, Newcastle will take the point and they'll be philosophical. But it's sign off here from Goodison Park for one last time. And yeah, what a pleasure it's been to cover football here in the last couple of decades. Unbelievable scenes here at Goodison Park.